Welcome back to engNatural, where we help you learn English naturally. I'm Puck, and I'm genuinely thrilled you've decided to spend some time with me today. You know, it's one of the most common frustrations I hear, and perhaps you felt it too. That feeling when you can effortlessly read an English article, catch almost every nuance in a conversation, maybe even binge watch an entire series without subtitles, but then, when it's your turn to actually speak, the words just get stuck. It's like there's a massive gap between what you understand and what you can articulate. It can be incredibly disheartening, leaving you wondering if you're doing something fundamentally wrong or if you simply lack the talent for speaking. But I'm here to tell you it's very likely none of those things. There's a much more profound, yet surprisingly simple, reason behind this common struggle. It's not about your intelligence or how much effort you've put in. It's deeply connected to the nature of how we acquire and use skills, and specifically the habits we form, often without even realizing it. Understanding this real reason isn't just theory. It's the key to unlocking your natural speaking ability. So, if that resonates with you, if you've ever felt that frustrating disconnect, then this episode is absolutely for you. Let's dig in. And hey, if you're enjoying the insights and the natural English practice here on engNatural, please consider hitting that subscribe button. It genuinely helps us reach more listeners like you who are eager to learn English naturally. Thanks for being here. Let's really unpack this idea of understanding versus speaking. It's a classic challenge, and it's not unique to language acquisition at all. Think about it through the lens of other skills. Imagine someone who is a huge fan of classical music. They can listen to complex symphonies, identify every instrument, discern subtle variations in performance, and even deeply appreciate the emotional depth of the compositions. They've spent thousands of hours absorbing this music. But does that mean they can sit down at a piano and flawlessly play a difficult concerto? Of course not. Or consider a sports enthusiast. They can watch countless basketball games, analyze every play, know the statistics of every player, and understand complex strategies. They've spent years as a knowledgeable spectator. But does that translate into them being able to step onto the court and execute a perfect jump shot or dribble past defenders with ease in a live game? Probably not, right? There's a world of difference between being a knowledgeable observer and being a skilled performer. The same principle applies directly and profoundly to English, or frankly, any skill you're trying to truly master. What we're truly talking about here is the fundamental distinction between passive knowledge and active application. Passive knowledge is all about input. It's what you take in, what you absorb. This includes reading books, articles, and news in English, listening to podcasts, music, and conversations, watching movies and TV shows. This is where your comprehension truly blossoms, where your vocabulary grows by leaps and bounds, where you intuitively start to grasp grammar patterns and nuances. It's crucial, absolutely vital for building a strong foundation for creating that rich reservoir of understanding. But then there's active application, which is all about output. It's what you produce, what you do with the language. This involves speaking, writing, engaging in real-time conversation, expressing your thoughts, opinions, and feelings. These are two distinct sets of mental processes, and they demand entirely different kinds of engagement and practice to develop true proficiency. Your brain, believe it or not, is an incredibly adaptable and highly efficient organ, but it's also highly specialized. It becomes exceptionally good at whatever you train it to do most often. If you consistently feed it passive input, reading and listening, it will become incredibly skilled at processing that input. It will excel at decoding messages, at understanding nuances, at making sense of complex information. It becomes a fantastic receiver. However, if you want it to excel at active output, at encoding your thoughts into spoken words quickly, smoothly, and confidently, at retrieving vocabulary on the fly, at forming grammatically correct sentences under pressure, you absolutely need to train it specifically for that. It's a different neural pathway, a different kind of muscle memory. Think of it like this: your brain has a listening muscle and a speaking muscle. If you only exercise the listening muscle, the speaking muscle won't develop in the same way. The real reason why so many intelligent, dedicated people understand English beautifully but struggle to speak isn't a deficit in their knowledge base at all. It's almost universally a deficit in active speaking practice. And, perhaps even more importantly, it's often a profound lack of forming the habit of speaking. Consider any physical skill you've acquired in your life: riding a bicycle, learning to swim, cooking a complex new dish, or even just mastering the art of driving a car. You don't simply know how to do these things from reading a manual or watching someone else do it. You have to do them repeatedly until they become second nature, until the process becomes automatic. This is what we call building automaticity, where the skill becomes so ingrained that you no longer have to consciously think about every single step or every single word. The process just flows. I can share a very personal story that, while not directly about language, perfectly illustrates the immense power of consistent active engagement in building a new capacity and overcoming a significant challenge. There was a period in my life, quite a challenging and overwhelming one actually, where I felt truly adrift, a bit lost, and found it incredibly difficult to even start my day with a clear head or a sense of purpose. I knew intellectually what I should be doing to feel better: getting more sleep, exercising regularly, eating healthier, being more mindful. But the sheer weight and perceived difficulty of implementing all of it made it feel absolutely impossible to begin. So I decided to pick one tiny, almost ridiculously small thing. Every morning, before I even looked at my phone or checked emails, I would sit down with a plain notebook and a pen for exactly 5 minutes. In those 5 minutes, I would simply write down 3 things I was genuinely grateful for, no matter how small, and then one tiny, actionable goal for that day. That was it. Just 5 minutes. It felt almost insignificant when I first started, bordering on trivial. But I made a non-negotiable, unwavering commitment to do it every single day, without fail, no matter how busy or tired I felt. And you know what? That tiny, consistent habit began to subtly, yet profoundly, shift my entire outlook and capacity. It wasn't primarily about the content of what I was writing, not really. It was about the act of showing up for myself, consistently, every single morning. It built a tiny bit of positive momentum, a small victory I could claim before the day even truly began. It taught my brain that I had agency, that I could initiate something positive and intentional even when the rest of my life felt utterly chaotic and out of control. That consistent 5-minute commitment wasn't just about cultivating gratitude. It was about building a mental muscle of discipline, self-care, and intentional action. It cultivated a kind of automaticity in initiating positive behaviors. The same precise principle applies to speaking English. You can't simply know the words. You have to practice the physical act of forming them with your mouth and tongue, the mental act of retrieving them quickly under pressure, and the emotional act of being comfortable with imperfection and real-time interaction. It's a whole different kind of neural engagement compared to just listening or reading. It's about building that consistent, active habit of speaking, just like my morning routine built a habit of intentionality and self-efficacy. Even just 5 minutes of intentional speaking practice a day, where you genuinely voice your thoughts aloud, can be absolutely transformative. It shifts your brain from being a predominantly passive receiver to an active, agile producer of language. It takes the vast English vocabulary and grammar you've absorbed into your passive understanding and moves it directly into your readily available, active, and usable speaking vocabulary. This subtle yet profound shift is quite often the real, overlooked missing piece in the puzzle of fluency. It's not about being smarter, it's about being more active and consistent in your practice. Okay, so we've established that understanding English is largely a passive process, while speaking it requires active application and a different kind of brain training. Now, let's dig a little deeper into how these different kinds of habits manifest in our language journey, and how some seemingly harmless or even beneficial behaviors can actually, perhaps inadvertently, reinforce the non-speaking pattern. On one hand, you have what I genuinely applaud as the passive consumption habit. This is the highly commendable and incredibly effective practice of spending hours immersing yourself in English, listening to podcasts, tuning into English radio, watching movies and enjoying TV shows, reading books, following English news, engaging with social media in English. Your brain, during these times, is truly a magnificent sponge, absorbing complex grammar patterns, connecting new vocabulary to contexts, internalizing accents and intonation, and making sophisticated sense of intricate ideas. Your comprehension skyrockets, your overall understanding deepens significantly, and your passive vocabulary grows exponentially. This is undoubtedly a fantastic, good habit for building a robust foundational knowledge. And honestly, please keep doing it. It's an invaluable part of your language journey. However, there's a flip side to this coin, a more subtle and often unconscious pattern that frequently hinders speaking development, what I might describe as the unintentional habit of avoiding active production. This isn't a bad habit in the traditional sense, like mindlessly scrolling on your phone or procrastinating on important tasks, which are often consciously recognized and fought against. No, this is more of an unintentional lack of a crucial habit, a default behavior of not speaking, or consistently not placing yourself in situations where you are genuinely compelled or even encouraged to speak. This habit of non-speaking can be reinforced by several very human and understandable factors. The fear of making mistakes, of course, is a colossal one. It's natural to want to be correct. Perfectionism plays a significant and often debilitating role. The ingrained feeling that you need to know everything perfectly or speak flawlessly with impeccable grammar and a vast vocabulary before you can even dare to open your mouth. You might even find yourself mentally scripting what you want to say, rehearsing it perfectly in your head, only to hesitate, self-correct endlessly, and then ultimately decide it's better not to voice it at all. And here's the truly fascinating and somewhat insidious thing about all habits, whether they're consciously beneficial or inadvertently restrictive, they typically follow a very predictable and powerful loop. There's always a cue, a trigger that initiates the behavior, a routine, the behavior itself, and a reward, the benefit, often subconscious, that you get from performing the behavior. Let's look at the passive consumption habit first. The cue might be, I want to unwind after a long day, or I want to improve my English. The routine is put on an English podcast or a TV show. And the reward? Immediate enjoyment, relaxation, the satisfaction of understanding, the feeling that you're making progress and expanding your knowledge. That's a powerful, positive, and a reinforcing loop, and it naturally keeps you engaged. But now consider the non-speaking loop, which is often far more subtle and subconscious. The cue might be, I need to say something in English, or someone just asked me a question in English. The routine, if you've developed this pattern, is hesitate, Overthink every word, silently correct myself countless times, feel a surge of anxiety, then ultimately decide it's better not to speak than to risk making a mistake or sounding awkward. And the reward? It's the immediate avoidance of perceived negative outcomes, avoiding potential embarrassment, avoiding the discomfort of a mistake, avoiding the feeling of not being good enough in that moment. So your brain gets a short-term win by not speaking, by staying safely within its established comfort zone, and that momentarily reinforces the non-speaking habit. It's quite clever and a bit sneaky how our brains can inadvertently work against our long-term goals, isn't it? It's like your brain is trying to protect you from perceived harm, even if that harm is just a minor social gaffe. I had a rather persistent bad habit for years that perfectly illustrates this kind of subconscious reinforcement and the power of a tiny immediate reward. For the longest time, I had this ingrained habit of just tossing my clothes onto a specific chair in my bedroom instead of immediately putting them away in the closet or laundry hamper. Every single day, without fail, after getting ready or changing, the clothes would inevitably land on that chair. The cue? I'm a bit tired after a long day, or I'm in a hurry and just want to get to the next thing. The routine? Effortlessly toss clothes on chair. The reward? Immediate gratification. I didn't have to spend an extra 30 seconds putting them away properly. And for literally years, that chair was perpetually buried under a growing mountain of clothes. It was a relatively harmless habit in the grand scheme of things, but it drove me absolutely crazy sometimes. I knew I should put them away. I perfectly understood why it was better to put them away, a tidier room, less clutter, easier to find things later, but the act of doing it felt like an extra minor effort in that immediate moment, and the immediate reward of not doing it, of avoiding that tiny bit of extra work, was stronger. It's a very similar psychological mechanism at play. You understand intellectually that you should speak English. You know the vocabulary and grammar rules, but the short-term discomfort, the slight anxiety of producing the language, of potentially facing mistakes or hesitation, often outweighs the long-term benefit for that immediate critical moment. Recognizing this specific habit loop, identifying the cue that triggers the avoidance, the routine of non-speaking, and the subtle reward of avoiding discomfort is the absolutely crucial first step towards change. Understanding that your brain is simply doing what it's been inadvertently trained to do by you is liberating. It's not a moral failing or a lack of talent, it's a deeply ingrained pattern. And the good news is, like any habit, it can absolutely be changed. You just have to become intentional about forming a new loop, one that actively prioritizes consistent, uninhibited output, even if it's just for a few moments at a time. It's about consciously retraining your brain to seek the reward of active production. So, with this deeper understanding of how habits work, particularly the distinction between passive consumption and active production, how do we actually go about forming those crucial active speaking habits? It really boils down to a few key strategies, all of which are deeply rooted in consistency, intentionality, and a gentle understanding of your own psychology. These aren't just abstract theories. They're practical, actionable steps you can start taking today, no matter your current level. First, and arguably the most important, let's talk about consistency. This is probably the most underrated yet profoundly powerful aspect of any skill acquisition, not just language. It's not about doing a massive amount of practice once in a while. It's about doing a little bit every single day. Think about it like building physical strength. You wouldn't expect to build significant muscle mass or endurance by going to the gym for 5 grueling hours once a month, would you? That would likely lead to injury or burnout. No, it's the daily, smaller, consistent workouts, even just 20 or 30 minutes, that incrementally builds strength, endurance, and muscle memory over time. The same precise principle applies directly to speaking English. Can you genuinely commit to just 5 minutes of active speaking English today? I know, that might sound almost ridiculously simple, perhaps even insignificant. But let's truly consider its power. In those 5 minutes, you could try talking to yourself in the mirror, describing what you see around you in your room. You could record a short voice note on your phone, narrating your morning routine, or explaining a simple concept you learned recently. You could even try to describe your actions aloud as you do mundane chores around the house. I'm putting the dishes away now. This is a blue plate, and this is a green cup. The key here, the absolute crux, is to make it a non-negotiable part of your day, however brief. Just 5 minutes. It's almost too small to fail, which, ironically, is its greatest strength. And that consistent showing up, that daily, intentional act of speaking, even when it feels a bit awkward or unnecessary, is what fundamentally builds your speaking muscle. It creates and strengthens the neural pathways for quick word retrieval and fluent articulation. It literally rewires your brain to produce language more easily, making the act of speaking less effortful over time. Second, closely tied to consistency, is the profound strategy of setting small, incredibly achievable goals. If your overarching long-term goal is, I want to speak English fluently and confidently in 3 months, that's a wonderful aspiration, a powerful vision. But it's far too large, too abstract, and too distant to serve as an actionable, motivating daily goal. Such grand goals can often feel utterly overwhelming and frequently lead to procrastination or giving up before you've even truly begun. Instead, break it down into micro goals, into tiny steps you can celebrate immediately. For today, maybe your goal is simply, I will correctly pronounce 3 new words I learned yesterday, saying them aloud 5 times each. Or, I will ask one simple question in English during my next online meeting, even if it's just to confirm something like, could you repeat that please? Or, I will describe my breakfast, or my commute, or my favorite hobby in just 3 complete, clear sentences. These tiny victories are incredibly powerful for several critical reasons. They provide immediate positive reinforcement, proving to your brain that you can do it, which directly counteracts that avoidance habit we discussed earlier. Each small success builds tangible confidence and positive momentum, making the next step feel less daunting and more inviting. It tells your brain, hey, this isn't so scary after all. And finally, a crucial element for solidifying any new habit, especially one that might feel challenging at first, incorporating a reward system. Our brains are hardwired for rewards. They seek pleasure and avoid pain. For those passive consumption habits, the reward is built in, the pure enjoyment of a movie, the intellectual satisfaction of understanding a complex article. For active speaking, especially when it initially feels challenging or exposes you to potential mistakes, you might need to consciously create a reward. It doesn't have to be anything grand or expensive. Perhaps after your 5 minutes of focused speaking practice, you allow yourself to listen to your favorite song, or watch one episode of a show you absolutely love, or enjoy a nice cup of your favorite tea or coffee. The idea is to create a positive association, a sense of pleasantness, accomplishment, or a little treat with the act of speaking English. This intentionally strengthens that new habit loop, making it more likely you'll look forward to it and stick with it tomorrow. Now, here's a surprising but incredibly effective tip that I've personally applied in various areas of my life, not specifically for language, but for overcoming inertia and building positive, lasting habits. It's called the 2-minute rule. This brilliant concept comes from the field of micro-habits, and it's truly revolutionary in its simplicity and profound impact. If you want to start a new habit, the core idea is to make the initial step so unbelievably small and effortless that it takes less than 2 minutes to complete. For instance, if your goal is to start reading more, the 2-minute rule translates to read 1 page. Not a chapter, not an entire book, just 1 single page. The profound goal here isn't to accomplish the whole task in those 2 minutes, it's to make starting the task so unbelievably easy that you literally cannot say no. It removes all the mental friction. For speaking English, it could be, say 1 complete sentence aloud about anything. Or say, "Hello, how are you?" to yourself, focusing on clear intonation. The immense power of this rule is that once you start, momentum often carries you much further than just 2 minutes. You might find yourself speaking for 10 minutes, or 20, or even an hour, simply because you got past the initial mental hurdle. But even if you only do the 2 minutes, you've kept your consistency streak alive. You've shown up. You've reinforced the habit of starting. It's genius because it completely removes the daunting mental barrier of needing to do something big or difficult. It just gets you over the hump of initiating the action. And that, my friends, is arguably half the battle won when it comes to building any new positive habit, especially the crucial habit of actively speaking and making your passive knowledge active. All right. So we've thoroughly explored building those crucial active speaking habits. But what about the other side of the coin? Those deeply ingrained non-speaking patterns, or even unhelpful speaking habits like constant hesitation, excessive self-correction, or the relentless pursuit of unattainable perfection. Breaking these habits requires a slightly different but equally powerful approach. It's not about brute force. It's about strategic replacement and self-compassion. First and foremost, it's absolutely crucial to identify the triggers. What consistently causes you to not speak, even when you know you could or should? This requires a bit of honest self-observation. Is it a specific person you feel intimidated by, or whose judgment you fear? Is it a particular social situation, like a large group gathering, a formal work meeting, or even just talking on the phone? Or, perhaps most commonly and subtly, is it an internal trigger, like the sudden thought, "Oh no, I might make a mistake," or "I don't know the perfect word, so I'd better stay silent"? Pay attention to those moments of hesitation, that feeling of a mental block. Once you can pinpoint these specific triggers, you gain immense power. You're no longer reacting unconsciously. You can then intentionally create a different, more constructive response instead of falling back into the old pattern. For instance, if the trigger is group conversation where everyone speaks quickly, your new pre-planned habit might be, "I will say one short phrase like, 'That's interesting,' or 'I totally agree,' or 'Could you explain that further?' or 'I have a question about that,' early in the conversation, within the first 5 minutes if possible. It doesn't have to be a profound statement or a complex idea. The primary goal is simply to get your voice heard, to break the silence, to register your presence, and to show your brain that speaking is an option, even a small one. Another incredibly powerful strategy, one that is fundamental to habit change, is to find a replacement habit. You see, you can't simply delete a habit from your brain. Our brains don't work that way. They don't have a delete button for behaviors. Instead, you have to replace the old, unhelpful habit with a new, more beneficial one that serves a similar underlying need, like avoiding discomfort, or provides a new, positive reward. If your old habit is stay silent and perfectly formulate every sentence in my head before speaking, then ultimately decide not to speak because it's not absolutely perfect, the replacement habit could be speak the first thought that comes to mind, even if it's imperfect, focusing on conveying the core message rather than absolute grammatical correctness or flawless pronunciation. The goal here isn't grammatical perfection. It's conversational fluency through consistent, real-world practice. It's about consciously embracing the idea that mistakes are an absolutely natural, unavoidable, and indeed valuable part of the learning process, not something to be feared or avoided at all costs. Think of mistakes not as failures, but as data points, opportunities to learn and adjust. And then, seeking support is an incredibly valuable, often overlooked, and deeply reassuring component of breaking these patterns. This could mean finding a dedicated language partner, someone who is also learning and with whom you can practice regularly in a low-pressure environment. It could be a tutor who provides structured feedback, gentle correction, and consistent encouragement. Or it could simply be a trusted friend or colleague who understands your journey and won't judge your attempts, but rather celebrates your efforts. Having someone to practice with who creates a safe, non-judgmental space can significantly reduce the fear of making mistakes and dramatically boost your confidence. It transforms what can feel like an intimidating, lonely solo endeavor into a shared, supportive, and often much more enjoyable experience. Don't underestimate the power of connection in this journey. Finally, and perhaps most crucially, there's the topic of self-forgiveness. Let's be brutally honest with ourselves. You are human, and you are going to stumble. You are going to have days where you completely avoid speaking English despite your absolute best intentions and all the strategies we've discussed. You are going to make mistakes, lots of them, probably awkward ones, definitely noticeable ones. And that is perfectly, completely, unequivocally okay. The biggest trap, the one that derails so many people on their journey, is to let one stumble, one missed practice session, one awkward conversation, or one perceived failure derail your entire effort and commitment. If you miss a day or even a week, don't beat yourself up about it. Don't fall into the mental trap of saying, "Oh, I failed. I'm clearly not cut out for this, so I might as well just give up entirely." That's a self-defeating narrative. Instead, acknowledge what happened without judgment, show yourself some compassion, just as you would a friend struggling, forgive yourself for being human, and simply recommit to starting again the very next moment. I can tell you from my own extensive personal experience, I've tried to break and build so many habits over the years, from exercising consistently to eating healthier to being more organized to even just staying on top of my paperwork, and the number of times I've failed to stick to my perfectly planned routine is frankly countless. I remember vividly trying to completely cut out sugar once. For the first few days, I was super strict, feeling great, thinking I had absolutely conquered it. Then, one evening, someone offered me a delicious chocolate cake, and I ate it. And then, almost immediately, that insidious little voice in my head chimed in with a familiar refrain. "Well, you messed up, you've already ruined your diet for the day, might as well finish the whole box of cookies too." That's the classic "what the hell" effect, where one slip leads to a complete abandonment of the broader goal. It took me many, many attempts and a lot of self-reflection to truly understand that one slip doesn't erase all progress. It just means you had a moment of deviation, a momentary lapse. You pick yourself up, you learn whatever you can from that moment, maybe that cake was a trigger or I was just tired, and you get right back on track. It's not about being perfect, it's about being incredibly resilient. It's about getting back on track immediately after a deviation without judgment or delay. For language speaking, it means if you have a bad day or a particularly hesitant or frustrating conversation, don't let that one experience define your potential or your overall progress. Acknowledge it, learn whatever you can from it. What was the trigger? What could you do differently next time? How can I prepare better? And then just speak again. The next sentence, the next conversation is a fresh start, a new opportunity to practice and grow. That mindset shift from "I must be perfect or I fail" to "I will be persistent, come what may" is ultimately what leads to genuine fluency and lasting confidence in speaking. It's about being tenacious with kindness to yourself. Wow, we've truly covered a lot of ground today here on engNatural, and I sincerely hope this conversation has given you a fresh, insightful perspective on why understanding English doesn't always automatically translate into speaking fluency. It really boils down to recognizing that fundamental difference between passive knowledge and active application, and perhaps more critically, truly understanding how deeply ingrained habits, both conscious and more often unconscious, play such a massive and often overlooked role in our ability to speak. We explored how the real reason for this common struggle often isn't about lacking intelligence or effort or even vocabulary. Instead, it's frequently about the unintentional lack of consistent, active speaking practice, which in turn reinforces a non-speaking habit. We also delved into how those avoidance habits can form, often subtly reinforced by a very human fear of making mistakes, and why it's so vital to identify those triggers. And then we shifted our focus to the truly empowering part, actionable strategies you can implement right now to bridge that gap. We discussed the immense power of consistency, emphasizing that even just 5 minutes of deliberate speaking practice a day can initiate profound change. We looked at the importance of setting those incredibly small, achievable goals that build confidence with each tiny victory. And we talked about creating positive reward systems to make your new speaking habits more appealing and sustainable. Remember that incredibly effective 2-minute rule, making the initial step so ridiculously easy that you simply can't say no. Just getting started, even for a moment, is often the hardest part, and this simple trick can unlock so much momentum and help you overcome inertia. We also touched upon the critical aspect of identifying and consciously replacing those old avoidance patterns with more productive, active ones. And perhaps, truly, most importantly, we emphasized the transformative power of practicing self-forgiveness. It's not just okay to stumble, it's inevitable. What truly matters is how quickly and kindly you pick yourself up and start speaking again. The journey to speaking English confidently is absolutely a marathon, not a sprint. It's about patiently and persistently building consistent micro-habits, nurturing your brain's capacity for active output, and, crucially, being kind and compassionate towards yourself along the way. Your brain is an utterly amazing, adaptable muscle, and it will develop whatever you consistently train it to. If you primarily train it to listen and understand, it will naturally excel at that. But if you also train it to speak, even for just a few intentional minutes a day, it will build and refine that essential skill too. So, let's begin to shift our focus from passively thinking, "I need to know more words," to actively saying, "I need to speak more words, even the ones I already know." I genuinely hope this episode has resonated deeply with you and provided some practical, actionable tools to help you bridge that frustrating gap between understanding and speaking. I'd truly love to hear your thoughts on this. What's your biggest personal challenge when it comes to speaking English? Or, after listening today, what's one tiny speaking habit you're going to try to intentionally start this week? Let us know. You can always reach out through our website or social media channels. Thank you so much for tuning in to engNatural. I'm Puck, and I look forward to chatting with you again very soon as we continue to help you learn English naturally. Until then, take care and keep speaking.